A number of years ago, I had the opportunity to be introduced to a man that would challenge everything I ever thought I knew about the dynamics of being black. One of my friends had told me one day, "Hey man, you got to meet this brother." They call him Redbone. Now, I'd heard the name Redbone used before, but usually was a reference to a real light-skinned white black girl. Never heard it often used in reference to a guy once in a while. So I just took it to mean that he was going to be a light-skinned guy. When we went to his house, knocked on the door, the guy opens the door, and what I'm looking at is a 5'7", 150-pound, extremely pale white, light brown haired, thin waspy nose, light green eyes, atypical white man. White in every visible way. Not a hint of ethnicity in him at all. And I had met many black men who looked nearly white. Curly hair, straight hair, light green eyes. I even met a few with blue eyes. And I'd met white men who imitated black people, mostly in the most insulting or stereotypical way. And on rare occasion, I'd meet a white guy that had a kind of generic accent that could be black or white. But I had never saw what appeared to me as an atypical white man, especially a southern white man, speak like him. After we came in and I sat down and he started to talk, it occurred to me that if I closed my eyes, what was in front of me was the voice of a southern black man, moderate education, hard, kind of new to the city words, but you could hear them country metaphors and analogies slipping in there from time to time. So, in talking to him, this was his story. Now, he was raised as the second of 5 children of a black family and somewhere in rural North Carolina. Now, his true mother and father, they were in fact white, and they were very young when he was born. In fact, his mother was about 16 when she had him, father about 18. Seems that they ran away from home, got married, didn't have any money, no resources, uneducated, desperately poor, and along with a few other similarly situated poor white folks, they found themselves eventually working alongside mostly poor blacks, cropping tobaccos in the fields all day on a tenant farm. They were lucky enough to find a room in a small, like 3-room shack that had been rented by a black couple. And they had already had a young baby that was about 5 months old. Now, subleasing was absolutely not allowed, so they had to kind of live on the low, and which meant that during the daytime they really couldn't be at the house at all, on that off chance that the owner would happen to come by. I think they knew some of this was happening, but at any rate, it wasn't the kind of life other than the place to lay down that they was living at. But so which meant that the whole family, they were all going to be close together. They lived pretty tight. So they kind of made an agreement that the man's wife would keep the baby, and also that she would wet nurse the baby so that she didn't have to come back from the field to breastfeed. And this was not uncommon in that place in that time, but certainly not something sophisticated people were still doing. So about 4 weeks after she actually gave her birth to her new baby, she really returned back to work in the field. And they needed that money. Because the deal was that they would get to stay there if they helped a little bit of money with the rent and kind of help with the food and stuff like that, but not much else. Early one morning it was kind of foggy and misty, and the white couple was looking at each other halfway across the road, and they was trying to meet up. And at the time as they kind of crossed the highway to kind of meet each other, at the same time they didn't see this old heavy log truck going screaming down the road. And they were both struck as they had walked halfway across the road and hit and thrown down the highway, run over, They were killed. Now the white couple killed. The black family still had that baby. They had no idea who that couple's real family was. They didn't even know for sure where they came from. They didn't have any papers. They had to bury them in a pauper's grave. And without really any formality at all, no court papers, no judge, no anything. They just kept the baby. They raised the baby. They gave them the baby their last name. And of course, over time, the couple would have 3 more children. All the kids the family called the baby. Oh, now the boy, Redbone. So he would grow up and live, eat, socialize just like they did. He was family. He really didn't have that much contact with whites. And I remember that whenever he got drunk, there were certain stories that he would express a lot, or he would recount over and over again. One of the ones that he repeated most typically was the one about being at a local general store and that he was told he was not allowed in there because he lived with those niggas, that he was a white nigger. When he was upbeat, he would often talk about how he and his brother, they kind of adopted their styles based on upscale city life. They wore big flashy suits with wide brim hats and suspenders, you know. They were brothers. They looked like twins, except for one was white and one was black. And he talked about all the jealousy that kind of provoked. Uppity nigga and crazy white boy. He would become more morose sometimes when he drank, and he would recall being beat up by gangs of white boys for being a nigger, and the irony of being beat up by a group of black boys for being white. He had lived that experience more than once. In listening to him speak on a variety of subjects, I would have to describe him in this way. If I were a blind man, I would think, this is an angry, white-hating black man. The most angry, drunken, outrageously upset black man I had ever met. Now, he had felt betrayed by whites, overlooked by whites, insulted by whites. He saw his family humiliated by whites. And the irony of having to defend his blackness countless times. I lost count of the number of times that he'd angered and confused blacks and whites equally when he'd get drunk and start these racist rants. Niggas, crackers this, white people this, niggas that. He must have been punched in the nose and had his ass whooped by blacks and whites equally. His long dialogues about the evils of the white race and what white people were capable of were extreme in the most. But I was left wondering. He was white, wasn't he? And what does it mean to be black? What does it imply? And what was Redbone?